we have built what we think is one of the most advanced use cases of a blockchain technology, right?
Blockchain! Run!
Exactly.
Run!
Exactly.
It's blockchain!
No.
SmarterUmedia is lucky today. We have one of the great entrepreneurs of Silicon Valley joining us all the way from that great enclave of entrepreneurship and technology. Vinayak Rao has worked at one of the largest technology companies in the world. That's where we met. And now he is helping redefine what Web3 is going to be. And we're going to learn what that even means if that's new to you today. Vinayak Rao, welcome to SmarterUmedia.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Good to see you.
It is always great to see you. Vinayak is a dear new friend of mine that has grown into one of my besties. And it's really great to have you here because I think the things that you are in the middle of are things that we hear about, little echoes, kind of think we understand, but we don't always. So thanks for joining us, man.
Just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you've heard of this guy. You've seen
I've
the
seen it.
chicken timer. You've seen it on Smarter You, and you know what's coming. So very quickly, we're just going to ask you to give us some nugget that will help make us smarter in a couple of minutes.
Perfect. I thought long and hard about this, but I'm going to stick with two very fundamental pieces of advice that I could give. We live in a world where we have access to infinite amounts of knowledge and opportunities that we could take every single day with just a computer and an internet connection and or a smartphone and internet connection to become smarter every single day. However, with that incredible blessing comes the curse of an abundance of things that could distract you, things that could make you lose sight of what it is you were trying to do and just take you down a long path that you probably didn't intend to go down. We've all been there.
True. Oh
We've
my
all been
God.
there. But I think the single biggest thing that I have done to maintain a balance in this ever confusing and distracting world is taking notes. It is not a sexy piece of advice. It is not it's not an advice that I think you'll hear most people talk about, but physically typing and even better, physically writing down things so that you can comprehend and listen and comprehend what you're listening to, and more importantly, understand what you're comprehending is a very, very powerful tool that has helped me kind of find organization in a very cluttered world. That's something that I encourage everyone to do on a regular basis. There's tools now that allow note taking to be done for you so you can quote unquote just listen. But unfortunately, I don't think that those are the best use cases for most people. Like, I actually think that the more you can physically commit to taking notes to make sense of the world around you, I think that that's going to help people in ways that I just am such a big believer in that.
Look at that. Look at that. That is a great launching pad. Your brain just works differently. It's sort of active listening, right?
Yes, correct. It's active listening. It lets you go back and not just importantly remember what was said, but remember to some extent a biased way, but remember your interpretation and your emotional and physical and mental response to what you were taking notes to. That's the part that I think
Interesting.
these automated note-taking platforms and anything that just automates the fundamentals for you really can't replicate, right? Because learning is more than just a mental thing. It's an emotional, it's a physical, it's a sensational thing that is more than just that.
100%. I think you're also tapping into a little bit of a universal principle. The more we learn about some of the incredible new technology, and I love that you come from technology and believe in it, but understand not only its limitations, but how it can limit us. And so when we're finding out more and more the things with AI and what it does if you rely on it too much, so you're just not thinking anymore, it is a thing.
It is. It is. And I think in this, the second principle, because I was rambling on in the initial 2 minutes, but the second fundamental principle is just, in addition to taking notes, make sure you ask questions. I think that that's something that has been so rewarding to me, both in a professional and also in a personal level, right? Because asking questions, if you ask people questions, you'll be surprised at how much people love talking about themselves. And in some ways, I say that in half in jest, but it's in some ways you learn some incredible things about people, and it's a fundamental thing that I think I always encourage people. I'm like, you have to find a way to learn about other people because that can help shape your worldview in a way that you shouldn't just be informed about the worldview that you have by your own opinions. I'm a firm believer in that consensus building needs to happen in group forms. That's why we're social beings. We're creatures that live in communities, and the best way to learn about your community is to ask them questions.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about all the time is curiosity. I mean, that's the word that brings questioning to mind, and genuine curiosity. I mean, you and I are a very good example of this because we started working together when you were at Facebook, now Meta, but then Facebook Gaming. And we got together to work on uh, across whatever political lines, encouraging people to have a voice in democracy. So Gamers Vote did multiple events with Facebook Gaming and had, I think, a pretty profound impact by doing that, right? But that all leads to you and I still have a bi-weekly call where we chat because we liked each other. I mean, how many times do you meet someone, you appreciate them and want to have more, but you don't take that next step? So I would add number 3 to your other 2 pieces of advice. So take notes, ask questions, and actively find people with whom you wish to continue to interact. And you have to take steps like you and I did. I don't even remember who asked whom, but I think
Yeah.
one of us said we should do this on a regular basis, whether we're working on a project or not.
Yeah, we finished up. I still remember the day. I mean, we were finishing up one of our work calls, just planning out. We were planning out a bunch of content based because it was during the pandemic. A bunch of digital content uh, designed around getting game streamers to encourage their community to go vote.
Yes.
And after one of those planning calls, you and I just stayed on to talk about one of the creators of one of the events, and then somehow, some way, as we always do, our conversation veered from game creators to encouraging people to vote to then all of a sudden we started talking about nuclear energy
Yeah, that's
and
right.
climate change and
Yeah.
ways that what our thoughts on the worldview were um and then somehow some way I just went down a rabbit hole about how I think nuclear energy is such a misunderstood concept and how we need to reinvest in this and figure out more and how it's been a dream of mine to go to Los Alamos. And then that's when I learned you lived in New Mexico, I think, or maybe I had learned that before. And then we started saying like, wow, like let me tell you a cool story. I know some people out in Oak Ridge, and it's some long-standing friends with people that you knew in Los Alamos. And then I think we just kind of took things from there. But it takes that, right? I mean, it took you asking me questions about myself. It took me asking you questions about yourself to form, I think, like a genuine relationship, which I think is it's not a lost art, but I think it's an art that people will be surprised at how easy it is to relearn, even if you think you've
Yeah.
forgotten.
Well, I think it's easy to think that things are lost, but I would certainly think there's no way that we don't get benefit by having more of that, right?
Correct.
Time's limited. Everything wants our time. And I start saying everything instead of everyone because everything is probably at top of the list, but then it's everyone
Yeah.
and the like. So time is limited, but boy, those new experiences, people who are in your lives, I can say from what I've experienced together with you is that that's a big deal. do it. Please do it. It's worth it. In fact, you came out to New Mexico. We
Hmm.
went to Los Alamos the first time that you were
Yep.
ever there.
Yep.
And those are the kinds of experiences that were
Yep.
with, yeah, I've been there before, but had never been there with the excitement that was in your eyes, and sort of saw it a whole different way, which
Yep.
was great.
And for the broader audience, this is before Oppenheimer came out. This
Right.
is
Yes.
this is
There was no
this.
Barb. There
There was
was
no
no op.
Barbenheimer. There was none of this. This was before it became, I think, a very, very hotly visited tourism site. There was one
I
coffee
would,
shop open that had, I think the only restaurant that was open was that coffee shop
yeah,
at Subway, if I'm
yeah.
not mistaken.
And
So
and we
I'm
went
sure
to the
it's changed a
coffee
lot since
shop. I'll
then.
never forget you standing up one at a time, taking each of the types of coffee and making it.
Yep,
You are a
yep,
foodie. You're one of my foodie friends. So
exactly,
so I'm
exactly,
sure we'll get to
and
that.
a aspiring coffee snob as well. But I
I love it.
still enjoy
Well,
my instant.
Well, there's so much to explore in sort of your perspective in technology. And I don't want to not get into the sort of universal principles things that we always do, but I'm going to start in the technology space just because I feel like you have a lens that is so unique in that space, having been at what is now Meta and gone through being in the finance industry for a shorter amount of time, and now really being at Aptos Labs at a Web3 blockchain. Oh, these are words that haunt us. I think the best explanation I ever heard was from the guy who wrote Life After Google, George Gilder, of what the blockchain is, but I'm going to put it on you. So tell me what Web3 is and why I need to know so much about it.
Yeah, totally. So let's start with like the very beginning. Like I feel like people always think like, what is Web 3? Well, let's talk about what Web 2 and Web 1
Amen.
are, right?
Yeah.
Well, when the internet was first coming out, right, it was in its infancy. People were pretty much, from a content standpoint, stuck to a single direction of experiencing content. That was Web 1, where individuals only had the ability to read content that was directly put on the internet, unless you knew how to design your own website. And this is before websites like Shopify or experiences like that, or Google Sites existed to help you create a web page. You had to hard code things on the internet, host the servers, which made it a much more arduous process than it currently is. Then things started changing as internet and broadband internet started scaling and becoming more accessible. We started coming up with new ways of interacting with the internet, where the everyday individual didn't need to necessarily write a website or build something from scratch. They could just upload things on their own, and they could create content and post things on the internet via blogs, via things like Facebook, via experiences like Tumblr, right, back in the day, and WordPress. That is what's called Web 2, right?
Right.
Um, and Web 3 is the next evolution of that, right? To where if Web 1 was writing content, and if if Web 1 was reading content, and Web 2 was writing content, and if Web 3 is what's at the next stage of that, right? And we think that that's owning content and owning things that are digitally represented on the internet. And the best way to scalably do that is by utilizing blockchain technology. And now we get to the second buzzword, which is, what is blockchain technology, right?
Blockchain. Run.
Exactly.
Run.
Exactly.
It's blockchain.
No, it's a lot easier than that. Trust me. Trust me. You don't have to run away once you understand what it is. As a non-engineer, let me give you my non-technical explanation of what it is. Every single thing you see in the internet, every single thing you see in the computer or phone you interact with, is built up of bits of data, oftentimes represented by binary numbers such as 0 and 1. And that accumulation of zeros and ones makes up literally everything that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, right? And that's data. And so what a blockchain technology enables is to prove and have a store of record to showcase why a single bit of data is what it is, and who can attribute ownership to that data and why it's owned by that individual. There's a lot more nuance into it that I
Sure,
don't think
sure.
we need to get into now, but
Yeah,
that's at a high level what it is.
right.
It's a it's a way of putting that information into a block and understanding and attributing it to an individual and or groups of people and allowing them to claim ownership and attribute themselves as the rightful owners of that bit of data. That's pretty much the simplest way of doing that, right? And if we have this vision of allowing ourselves to create a version of the internet that would allow you to then own aspects of what you then produce and or create, that's the best way that we found to feasibly build that out.
I will go back to George Gilder because he gave a very beautiful, I think, historical metaphor that helped me and still helps me with what the
Uh-huh.
blockchain is. So he he referenced what property, real property was in medieval England. So if you would have a piece of land that was yours, you had a piece of paper that said this land was yours. And oftentimes that would go into some monk's shelf somewhere in a repository where those records were kept. The problem with that was that it would burn down. And so, or wars, all the things that were a mess. And so trying to figure out what real property was a nightmare. One town came up with this brilliant idea of just publishing everyone who owned everything. So you are so much less likely not to know because there will be all of these copies of what the registry was, and it's not going to be in one place and you're not going to lose it. Was it perfect? No. But
Exactly.
that gives you some sort of similarity to what you're talking about, which is the blockchain, and it has a what's it called? The registry,
Yep. Ledger.
the ledger. Thank you. It has a immutable ledger that is published all over the place that you can go back to and say that that is what it is. And that's kind of the metaphor that works most for me because I sort of reaches down into where my brain can inhabit.
Exactly. And breaking it down even simpler, what is a ledger? I mean, a ledger, think of a ledger as basically way back when accountants used to have these physical books called ledgers. I remember this because my grandmother, up until the close to her passing, still maintained her accounts in a
Yes.
physical ledger.
Yeah.
Um, money in, money out. Every single week, she would update this book that she then called her ledger, and that was her source of truth, right? And think of what a blockchain enables is basically saying, hey, this piece of land that someone owns is just basically tied to this ledger that is then the source of truth that then showcases what publicly each individual owns. And there's a lot of other things on the privacy side that I think blockchain technology also unlocks because it allows people that want to stay anonymous to stay anonymous, right? Um, but there's indisputable evidence to say that this piece of asset is owned by someone else.
Is owned by someone else, and then it gets more complicated and nuanced because you have a private key that goes along with the public
Public
key
key, of
and
course.
whatever that key is, and people do it in different ways. But if you lose the key, there famously is a question of whether one of the people promising to be Satoshi, the guy who created Bitcoin,
Yep.
just says he
Yep.
lost the key.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
which, by the way, if that's true, then
That's billions of
you
dollars just waiting.
then that's a bummer of a day, right?
It is.
If you want that stuff back, but that's sort of it. Again, everything has its nuance. What does Aptos Lab do? And if you go to Aptos Lab's website and look at the various verticals that you have, you do a number of different things to help people create and use the blockchain space. So let's talk about them. Let's unwrap them.
Yeah, so Aptos Labs is a company that's building our own blockchain, right? Much in the way that we are using the ledger analogy, right, of the physical like book that accountants used to use and keep a store of record, right? We have built what we think is the one of the most advanced use cases of a blockchain technology, um, because of the underlying technology that's within it, right? So for context, Aptos is actually the blockchain that spun out of Facebook's Libra project. So back in
Gotcha.
2020 to 2021, Facebook was working on launching its own blockchain called Libra. It had spun out a ton of initiatives to kind of help take this off the ground and make it successful. And ultimately, at Facebook, we ran into regulatory hurdles, right? So we scrapped the project, and our co-founders at the time decided, hey, this technology is like revolutionary. I mean, there's so much research and development put into this, and so many people spent countless hours building this out and taking it from an idea to more than just a proof of concept. What if we could take this proof of concept with Facebook's blessing and then completely spin out an independent company and network so that the mission at least continues on? That's how Aptos was founded, right?
Yeah.
Our mission is to build what we hope to be the most performant blockchain that can drive this narrative of digital ownership forward, and also enable financial experiences that were otherwise unable to be provided to the average individual person, right? Which
Right.
is, I think, the most common use case that people are aware of. The most common application of blockchain technology is a cryptocurrency. A cryptocurrency is just one use case of blockchain technology, right? You've all heard of Bitcoin, you've all heard of Ethereum, Solana. It seems to be all over the news today, right? Which, when you look back where we were 10, 12 years ago, this was like on the fringe corners of the internet, right? And it's really remarkable because I think the original mission of what Bitcoin, and the co-founder of, or one of the founders, creators of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, who you just referenced, kind of entailed, was to even the playing field and give more people access to um, a non-inflationary a currency that isn't beholden to the whims of the Federal Reserve and or the economic decisions of a certain government and or individual, right? Um, and it's like a very interesting concept, right? Because I think it was historically tied to a mission that was very much designed around democratizing access to novel ways of creating wealth. And that's something that I think is one of the most common use cases for why blockchains exist, right? Is to find new ways to increase financial literacy, increase opportunities to access capital that historically would not be allowed to the individuals that we service. Anyone on this day has on a blockchain the same access to, you know, levers and tools that would be only available to regulated investment bankers, right? In a way that I think can help educate and also encourage discourse of financial literacy in a way that I think few technologies have.
All right. So let's talk, because the key phrase I think that you just said was new ways of creating wealth. Bitcoin was this dream. It was this thing that people said, we don't want to be beholden to the banks anymore, the banks and all the regulatory stuff and all those things. And now we're going to create our own system that will somewhat mirror gold, maybe, or will be an asset that can grow. And then you can use that to pay people. You can do that in a faster, cheaper way. You're not paying the 6% that you pay when you're using your credit card.
Yep.
I mean, all of those things are powerful in terms of a pitch. Now you've been in it for a while, and you and I have watched it for a while. How we do it? That's
Yeah.
isn't that the real tough question? I think that's the real tough
Yeah.
question. How we doing? Because
100%.
we want to deliver on the dream part, but at the end of the day, we oftentimes create what we saw before because it's what we know, or
Is
it's
what we know.
the way, maybe it's the way those things just work anyway.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's why I always harp on, like, I think like the cryptocurrencies are just one use case, right? And replicating financial markets, or the decentralized finance markets, which are what they're called or acronymed into DeFi, is just one use case of what this vision of Web3 can kind of unlock, right? Um, I actually think one of the most powerful use cases in a world that we live in that's so governed by artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence is, it seems to be the new buzzword, but in reality, there's actually like very um, life altering paths that I think we could kind of move forward in, right? If this industry and technology takes off in the way that many people think it will, which I also am one of them, right? But in the world of content creation, right, where you have a musician right now whose data is getting scraped by AI models to help make it a better LLM, and help other people basically create new modeled content off of someone else's work, right? A blockchain actually can help unlock true ownership and attribute ownership to an individual's content, so that every time that bit of data, because again, it all goes back to data, right? Every time that one single bit of data gets accessed, it's attributed and won't be usable by LLMs unless a certain criteria has met. What I just described is the basic fundamentals of a smart contract, which is how developers build on top of certain blockchains,
Right.
right? And that to me is such a powerful unlock, right? Because it's yes, the financial use cases seem to be the biggest and most common ones. However, I think about how is this going to affect like the musician that wants to take off and distribute their music online, right? Like how is this going to affect the filmmaker in college that wants to release their documentary on YouTube or Vimeo or Dailymotion or any of these sites, right? To me, that I think is a far more applicable use case for some of the problems that this will solve, that I actually am very excited about.
I love that. Again, a dream. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It
Of
would be
course.
lovely to do that. And I'll tell you, the music industry is a great example of how they managed, even with much earlier technology, to pay musicians when it seemed so complicated there would be no
Yeah.
way. But BMI and ASCAP, these two
Hmm.
groups that put together this program, makes it so if somebody used your music in an analog and a digital, even when it became digital sense, then you would have payments that would come to you. Again, was it perfect? No.
Royalties, right?
Was it the ultimate solution? Probably not. Did the music industry get disrupted anyway? Oh yeah, right? I
Yeah.
mean, as soon as Napster started doing what Napster started doing, it's never been quite the
The
same.
same. Yeah.
But at the same time, to be able to have technology, because there's no way to solve it unless you're taking the data equation and managing to identify it with bytes. That's what you're saying the blockchain promises, is that it has a shot at creating this immutable ledger that will allow your special song, that song that I wrote last night that was so good, Vinayak. I mean, it was just really so good, and I just have to
Can't
hold
wait to
on
hear
to
it.
it long enough to get it on Aptos, so Aptos Labs, so that it will be forever mine. But then when the AI wants to scrape it and use it as data, the idea is that you'd like to make it so that now I can say, yeah, I know it's mine because I put it on the blockchain that is Aptos Labs. That can identify it. The ledger shows that you used it, and therefore you owe me 0.0021 cents.
It's, yeah, more or less. It's getting AI models to train on data that's exactly like that, built on platforms that are using this technology, essentially.
Right.
Um, and I think that's like a that's that's the dream, and I think that's the reality that we are slowly building today. You have to remember, I mean, most people didn't know what an LLM was until 2023,
Are you
right?
kidding me? I'm,
I
I'm the
mean,
old guy. I'm the one who can tell you. Yeah, I can give you those use cases
yeah,
all the way back. Where there were
yeah,
three networks that just turned their lights off at night, and you'd have a test pattern.
Exactly.
Believe me, in a very short amount of time, there was life before Google.
There was, of
Yes, not
course.
just
Yeah,
life
yeah,
after Google.
exactly. But before OpenAI launched ChatGPT, this notion of like, I mean, most people when they heard about AI probably thought like, oh, it's like the AI in COD Warzone is really it's set to level hard or it's set to like ultra difficult, like it was mostly used in the context of like video game artificial intelligence
Yeah,
and or the Terminator,
yeah,
with Skynet or whatever. But I think like that's to show you how fast the technology has evolved. I mean, that to me is the most mind blowing thing, right?
yes,
With the evolution of technology, I want to go back to the Napster example, right? Because one thing that a lot of people thought that after Napster, LimeWire, the torrenting industry just kind of took off. Piracy of content took off in a way that
sure.
people thought it was irreversible, right? That
Yeah.
we are forever damaged. We've ruined the livelihoods of artists. We've ruined the livelihoods of so many incredible people, which didn't really pan out. And the reason why is because I think like if you present people with an economical option that allows them to access content in a legal way that's also in line with their budgets, most people will probably do that. And that's what I think was the revolutionary kind of the what I don't think people sing enough praises for what I think Spotify initially did to actually make accessing content in a legal way very, very doable by building a solid product that had a very, very clear UI and user interface that is an economic model that wasn't breaking the bank of the user. Now, there's tons of other problems that Spotify is now facing, right? Like the same problems aren't paying artists fairly and negotiating fair rates. But I think it solved one aspect of the consumer problem to where consumers really don't mind. I mean, years before Napster and Spotify, we were buying CDs, we were buying cassettes, we were buying records,
Are you kidding me? This is so
right?
much cheaper than somebody who was a music aficionado.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's a bargain, right? They
It's
just
a
give
bargain,
infinite
exactly.
amounts. And of course, Spotify wasn't first. Facebook wasn't first. That's the way
No,
this always works. But what they've done is really managed to put enough things together and make a product that's so great that it's the go-to. So
exactly.
the market does that. I would say too, though, that when we dig into what happened in or around that disruption, whether it was Napster or the ones that came after, I think there was a reality that we're used to being told what to listen to.
Hmm.
And and I don't mean that in an automaton sort of way, but we're used to having radio at the time, right? First, it was
Yeah.
radio that would play the song, and that's how you would know, that's how you would discover it. And the same sort of thing is probably necessary. There's almost now an infinite amount of music. You're highly unlikely to curate infinite music. So what it does very well now is to help me find my own music that I like and help me find more of that, and then get smart at promoting through the old industry. I'm just telling you, the record companies aren't gone. They thought they were all dead. The film companies and studios, they're not
No.
gone, but everybody thought they'd be dead.
Yeah.
It's simply because the infrastructure is truly built in such a way that the customer and the infrastructure are intertwined. We're the Borg. We're absolutely the Borg.
100%. Yeah. I
We're the
couldn't
Borg.
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think this notion that streaming is. I remember there was a hysteria back in 2014, 2015, once Netflix really started taking on streaming as a serious business unit, right? Revolutionary technology as a whole. But I remember there being a lot of discourse where people were worried that this would spell the end of entertainment and content distribution as we know it. And in reality, in fact, it's done the opposite in the grand scheme of things, not without its own problems, but in a post Netflix world, the ability for me to access content and create or and access content that I think is more tailored to me has allowed what would have been niche categories of shows or niche categories of content to really become more popular and accessible, right? Because I'm no longer beholden to what the channel list on DirecTV is letting me watch. I'm no longer beholden to the 10 movies that are playing in my local cinema, right? I have access to so many other bits of content, which goes back to my first point about like there's so much distraction out there, right? But I think
Boy, is there a
it's
lot of distraction. Yes,
yeah,
and again, it's infinite, and nothing's nothing that we can quantify is infinite. But if I can never get to it, that's the equivalent of infinite for me.
yeah, exactly,
So if you
exactly.
started watching to get through the entire library of your current streaming services, you would not make it by the time you pass away.
No,
I
no,
mean, even if you took every waking, if you cut down your sleep. So that is another piece of life that we're about ready
yeah,
to open up. But I want to
yep,
maybe button up a little bit on the technology side, because once we get to the reality of the fact that things have changed, we're now in this promising world where we can have a ledger that will make those things trackable. What does that world look like? I mean, if you paint a picture, and I'm going to challenge you with this one because I know you love food. So,
hmm
it dare to try to make describe what Aptos Labs does in cooking terms.
Oh man,
Use the metaphor of cooking. It's sort of
yeah.
the food that you're whipping up. What is that meal going to look like when we look forward into the future that includes a true functioning blockchain?
Yeah, totally. I think it's as our society becomes more and more digital and digital oriented, and as technology becomes more ingrained with the biological human experience, I think that that's where this notion of ownership will really come into play,
Mm,
right? Um, the most prominent use cases we've already talked about, right, which are cryptocurrencies and owning digital uh, content, right? But I think that as people spend more time, the notion that people always say it's like as people spend more time online, I think we're past that. I think that's a very inaccurate way of looking at the future. I think the way that we have to look at it is as technology literally becomes more of a biological, physical integration into our lives. I think that that's something that our technology can really help unlock to make sure that people are aware of what's what, right? That it's not just uh,
explain what you mean by biological integration. I think I know,
yeah.
but
I
tell me
mean,
what you mean, because it's crazy cyborg stuff. Isn't that what you mean?
it it is. I mean, it is, but it's also things that I think we don't even realize. I mean, right now I have two supercomputers inside of my earbuds that are processing the sound from where you are, which is somewhere far away from where I am, and taking my voice and processing that and capturing that and sending it to you in real time at the speed of light. I mean, if that doesn't, if you, we almost take that for granted, but when you stop for a moment and think about that, it's like, I just can't help but just think about all these incredible, like, holy shit moments, right? That we have every day that I just like, I always encourage people. I mean, look, it's just, it's the direction that we're going and it's remarkable that we're just so easy to take that for granted. It's so easy to take that for granted, right?
Yes.
Um, right
So,
now, I mean, just an example, I have a watch on me that
yeah,
tracks my health and my heart rate and how many steps I take,
right,
right? The
right.
technological experience is becoming a biological experience.
It
Um,
is already, and if depending on what works and what doesn't work, the intent is that it could be a lot more, right?
mhm.
That you are creating things that could be implanted in humans in order to make us better, smarter, faster. And that could be part of it. Maybe that works, maybe that doesn't work, or who knows how long the event
Yeah,
horizon looks like on that front.
right.
Yeah.
But to go back to to answer your original question, I think the biggest way that I see the blockchain technology is making this kind of enhancing this experience and making this a more fair and robust thing is as we're becoming as the line between digital and physical starts to kind of blend together,
Right.
right? It's very clear to say what's physically yours. Like this headphone case is mine.
Right.
It's right there. But
Right.
as we start interacting with things on a more digital basis, right? Like the dollars that are in your bank account today, right? The piece of art that you want to display in your virtual home, and or the deed to my house is tied to a physical paper, but also a digital representation of that physical paper. I mean, like when you think about these things, you interact with the digital version of these things so much more, especially with cash and,
Almost
you know,
exclusively at this point.
documents,
Yeah.
almost exclusively,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And you need to find a way to make sure like that digital document is a verifiable, undisputed source of truth, that is yours. And that's where I think like as technology becomes more integrated with our everyday physical reality, that's where I think blockchain technology can really cook up something interesting for us.
Yes. And the philosophical questions that will come with that probably are things that you sit around and talk with your cohorts at work and at home about, because you and I are stuck being philosophers, amateur or
Yeah.
not. I don't know. I think we're
Yeah.
pretty good,
Always.
but I truly think you start asking about uh, things like music. We will stick to the music example. If you wrote a line that was 5 notes, or let's not do that. Let's say it's 5 measures of something that's the hook in your song. And that hook then is yours. Someone accesses it and they're able to find it. I am sure pretty quickly we're going to be having those things be very similar,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're only a certain number of notes and octaves. So as they get put together, it's a larger number than you would think. It is, because those things are bigger than you think. But it still comes to a point where if you do something that sounds very much like what Mozart wrote, but you didn't even know that, is it now public domain? And how do you solve that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that is one that we'll need to iterate on and deal with as we handle those problems. I think like the notion of IP protection, intellectual property protection, that is, and what blockchain can do to actually protect that. I actually think it's the opposite. Where this technology can make it very, very streamlined and clear that this is the clear digital and or physical intellectual property of an individual. Now, I think where we still don't have answers to everything, and those are some of the things that actually excite me about being in this, right? Is we face new problems every day that I don't, I can comfortably admit I don't have the answers to, but we work every day to try and come up with answers to them.
Sure.
We're not going
And
to answer them all,
no, I'm
but I
sure
think
that
we,
it's this brave new frontier, right? Or brave
mm-hmm,
new world, if you want to think of it in a
of
scary sort
course,
of way. But it's
yeah,
in in that context, an IP copyright was a law for years and years that just had a very simple formula. You would
mm-hmm,
have to prove that someone had access to whatever the thing was, and that it was significantly similar to it. But that first piece of it, the access, is possible if you're in a court and you're sitting talking about, which by the way, no one should ever go to court. This is what you and I should, if you don't remember anything else about today's Smarter
yeah,
UFC, please never go to court. Don't ever sue anybody.
avoid it.
It's
Yep,
never worth it to your life.
yep,
It's just never
yep,
something worth doing, as a recovering attorney tells you. But the that is a big determination that you're doing. I think it's one of those things that if it's sort of replaced, unless there is a universal ledger. In other words, if there's Ethereum, if there's Aptos Labs, if there are the other platforms that are out there, how does that's another question I'm sure that you try to
Yeah,
figure out, because you need to be able to cross-reference those things, or it's pretty hard to sort of identify that you're quote safe, or your thing
yeah,
is identified anywhere and everywhere forever. Maybe?
totally. I mean, using the analogy of countries, right? I mean, we still, while we have a United Nations, we still have several countries that comprise of that concept of a United Nations, right? And think of blockchains as representations of each of these countries,
Hmm.
right? Each country has its own, and using the analogy of IP laws, each country has its own, each jurisdiction has its own IP interpretation of IP laws and the ways they enforce it and the ways that laws are allow people to do or not do certain things. But they still exist, right? And for someone to do something and or interact with IP in a cross continental or cross national way, they still have to be aware of how these things operate and work, but they still exist and are there, right? I think that that's the best analogy that I could make into where content that exists on one blockchain and content that may exist on another is a representation of that, right? To simplify the analogy, to where the content exists, and if the user wants to showcase content from another country, they still have to know how to interact with the rules and operations of the other country,
Sure.
right?
That's a very good
Um, yeah, a
analogy
lot more
to
nuance
get
and
me there.
details to that, but I think that's like the simplest way I could think
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
This.
We're going to go somewhere completely different. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Get ready for the
Let's do it.
whiplash. You were graduated from UMass Amherst.
That's right.
You were
That's right.
president of the Student Government Association while you were there.
I
And
was.
I think we undervalue so often experiences like that, where you
Yeah.
are put in a situation where you're running things and the like. How has the experience of being a part of, whether you're leading it or not, but being a part of something like that where people are doing their best to govern themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I mean, I was. It was such an incredible kind of experience for me because like I was not the best president and I did not lead in a way in hindsight did not lead in a way that I think was the most effective, but boy did I learn, right? Did I learn so much. And it almost it's cliched because like if I didn't have the failures and the if I didn't make the mistakes that I made back then, I don't know if I would have been smart enough to catch them at later points in my career where I then avoided making them
Yeah,
in my adult life, right?
for
And
sure.
not that my post college life.
Yeah.
Um, so and these were some fairly high stakes scenario, right? I mean, we were our Secretary of Finance at the time managed a student union budget of at the time I think $2.6 million, which I was 21, 22 years old, and helping someone manage a budget of $2.6 million was just I mean like we had an incredible team that managed it, but it's just like that is
Daunting.
that's that's like even today that's mind-boggling
Oh, it's
numbers.
daunting. And there were what, 22 some odd thousand students, something like that?
Yeah, 22,000 undergraduates. Yeah,
And you ran the finance in a earlier year. Weren't you in that position before you were president?
in
Yes.
a subcommittee within the finance organization,
I see.
yes, where we allocated emergency funding for organizations that needed it. But it taught me so much. I mean, that work was a shocking. I mean, there was so much overlap between that and my work in venture capital because I mean, not to. I mean, it's actually you made me think about this. I haven't thought about it this way ever, but the emergency funding meetings were very much similar to investment committees, right? To where we'd
Oh,
sit
yeah.
down, evaluate a proposal, think about, all right, we have this much budget, as most funds evaluate how much budget they have left in the remaining funds. How do we then allocate that budget in a effective way, right? A lot of times you say no because there just isn't enough budget and you need to have it last you throughout the life cycle of that fund. And and now that you made me think about this, I was like, wow, yeah, I literally like that was such a powerful experience. And they were like, we were like starving for members to join student government, right? This wasn't like the most active and or, sought after organization to join in most campuses. So I maybe other campuses have a different experience, but to anyone that's in college and anyone in Texas Tech, I don't know what it's like over there, but if you have the opportunity to join student government, 100% do it. The only other thing that could kind of make up for the experiences that I had were going out and starting my own company. That was the only other thing. Getting an internship at a big company was definitely something I wanted to do. I actually never had an internship at all because all my time was devoted to student government, in my internship years, that is. But the work that I did there helped dramatically help me prepare for the workforce. So yeah, wow, you just made me realize that. Thank you, Steve.
Look at that. We're digging
Thank
in.
you.
We're digging
Yeah.
in. We're digging into ourselves because we always learn, right? And this is,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
started out by telling us that you need to be in touch with and communicating with people and curious about it
Yeah,
because you will learn about yourself.
100%.
Well, look at there, right there.
I love
Quick
this. I
and fast.
mean, my chair of the finance committee is, I mean, I've never put those two together, but now that I think about it, yeah, that was, it was a sneak peek into sitting in investment committees and evaluating deal memos, Steve.
Well, I love that. I will say that if I were to take a snapshot of your life and your career, I think there are a lot of people, young people who are coming into the workforce or contemplating coming into the workforce. So whether you're in school or you're not going to school and you're going to go straight out into the workforce, right now there's this fear around so much that's going on. I don't think it is wildly different. And that's probably not fair because I didn't have to face AI and all of those sorts of things. But nothing gets adopted as fast as you think. And it is all still people hiring people from the systems that are currently in place. But I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of those people would look at your trajectory and your life as something that they would go, man, I'd love to have me some of that. So, in that context, what is a little bit of your journey? So, when you came out of college, you, I know, are a very honest guy. You are open about how those things are, and they're not always the perfect, excuse the expression, Facebook story of how it works. It's bumpy along the way, and you find your way. How has your journey been, and how can you help us navigate it better today? When
Yeah.
Henry, who my son, when Henry comes out and he starts in, what kind of advice do you give to him and his contemporary?
Yeah, totally. I think it's realizing what your people always say, like, I think Scott Galloway always says, is like, the biggest problem with today's world is like we were fed this notion that you have to follow your dreams, but when in reality he thinks that you should follow what your skills are. I
Mm.
think there's some truth to that. I think there's actually a balance to it, right? To where your passions should also fuel your skills, and hopefully they both reward each other in a mutually beneficial ways. Um, for me, I bring that up because like my passion has always been people. Like, I think people is just like people have always fascinated me, and it's like I remember as a kid, I used to pepper people with questions, and I was so blessed because like my parents have never once said stop asking questions. That's a stupid question. Like they
Enough already.
always like
Stop
yeah
being
they
curious.
like
Stop it.
exactly. Sometimes I asked them inappropriate questions, and they didn't say that's a stupid question. They said that's a question you should probably not ask and not say out loud in front of the person you're asking it about.
Yeah.
but those are
Yeah.
but those are powerful learning experiences, right? So I think like for me, my passion was always people, and then I realized I was like, in order to learn about people, the skill I had to develop was asking questions about people. And that then opened like a cascading effect of just like of results is almost it's I don't want to sound like too kind of self-righteous, but like
Congratulatory. But
yes,
look, you've done, look, I'm saying
but
I
but
set you up
results.
for it. Well, you can let me
Yeah.
do the one. You have gone to places to work for Facebook, Meta, to be in Silicon Valley working with a hot uh, company that's creating technology. Those are dreams for a lot of people who are coming
Yeah.
into the market. So no need to be
Yeah.
humble.
And
Go ahead and
thank you.
let
No,
us
no, I appreciate that.
know the real story, right?
Yeah, and again, it all boils down to people, right? Like I studied film at the University of Massachusetts. I was a communication major, focusing on film studies. I thought I wanted to be a screenwriter in Hollywood. I realized about like halfway through, like Hollywood probably wasn't for me. They wouldn't have accepted me because I wasn't good enough to be a screenwriter. Steve, if you read some of my manuscripts, you'd have ripped them up and sent me back to the
I'm
the
sure I
drawing
would
board.
have been much nicer than that.
Exactly. But so when I realized like okay, like I need to find a job after this, right? I focused on two things. It's just like who are the people that I can meet and how can I meet them? And the way that I realized the the way that I kind of sourced the people that I could meet were by getting involved with organizations on campus that were outside of my academic um, focuses, right? So the primary ones that I joined were my fraternity in Greek life at the time, Theta Chi, and then I joined student government, and then I joined TEDx UMass Amherst, which had all three of those had profoundly life changing, like life altering paths and outcomes as a result, right? And not just because of the organization, but because of the people that I met as a result of those organizations, right? That came into my life.
Great tip.
For full reference, right? Like because of the friends that I made in TEDx UMass Amherst, for example, the first two jobs that I got out of college were from people that ended up working at these companies and that ended up referring me.
Fabulous.
In fact, like the first startup I ever worked at was someone who referred me. That was my co-marketing director for TEDx UMass Amherst. The person that brought me to Facebook and the venture capital fund that I joined was a dear friend of mine named Henry, also great name, who was the president of TEDx UMass Amherst at the time.
Yeah.
And I really like go back to this point about people because it's like you never realize like how someone's going to change your life. And when you're 18, you're not like you shouldn't be expected to realize that. But the sooner I think people in college like realize it's not just what you know, but it's who you know and when you know them, that's when I think you can really overcome this fear of how uncertain this job market is, or how difficult it's going to be to get a job in the world of AI, because AI can't do what you do, right? It can do a lot of other things a lot better. Don't get me wrong, and you should use it to make yourself better. But an AI is not going to be the best version of you that you can be to whoever's listening to this or to any of your students, right? And I truly mean that. And it all boils down to how you interact with people. That's
I
the best
love
advice I can
this,
give.
and I want to restate it because I want to make sure that that I understand. You took the track of figuring out what kind of people you wanted to get to know, and then do something. Don't just imagine that you can walk up and find them, right? Warren Buffett, go to his cafe, and he's all of a sudden going to give you a job. But if what you do is are actively engaged in something and that is where those people are going to be, you naturally have opportunities to do things you'd never imagined you could do.
Exactly.
I just think that's pretty fantastic, and it is so old school. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
if you think about it, as we're sitting talking about technology and how everything is changing and it's all different, it's not. I mean,
no,
the way that you got those jobs, the things that allowed you to build your position so you could be in another place, that those things truly came from person to person, finding and getting to know somebody, and then they trust that it would be so you'd be someone that they want to be around.
yeah,
I mean, that's a
yeah.
huge thing, and you've since in the marketplace really been hiring people. So
Hmm.
that translates directly into that piece of it. When you look at someone and you're looking who you're going to hire to be in positions, what kind of stuff do you rely on?
I think the baseline will always be that there's a fundamental expectation that you need to do good work. I don't think anyone is. I think that shouldn't be stated, but I think that should be the baseline fundamental that the work that you can do is good, right?
Yes.
Whether that's in school, whether that's on the field, whether that's in the workforce, that should be the baseline fundamental. Now, when you're competing against other people that all do the same amount of work, is what you can do to make yourself stand out. And in some ways, the just understanding people can make you seem and make you much more qualified and credentialed of a candidate than someone who might be better at you than the job, but is just not the same with their interpersonal and or EQ skills, right? Um, and so I really like say this, like we're social creatures, right? Like we're creatures of communities, and the more you can ask questions about people and learn about them and meet people and get to know people that way, just the far better outcomes in life that I think you could get yourself exposed to.
100%. Well, let's see. I know that we could talk forever because we do. So we're
We do.
we're
Real.
not going to go much longer. But I uh, know that you've come with something that will help me to find ways to find information better. Actually, I'm going to do one thing before I get to that,
And Steve,
though.
I'm good on time, by the way.
Are you good? Because
Yeah,
I
I'm good
would
on time.
I would like to ask you. You are someone who I think better than me and better than a lot of people I know seems to really be able to find balance in your life. And if it's an
Thank you.
act, don't tell me because I really like to admire that in you.
Uh,
I I give me some of that because I feel like you're very intentional in how you balance work, which is a lot, and your life, and you take time to go places because you like to travel. That's a real art. Describe that art in your life to help me out.
yeah, totally. I think like one of the first things that like I, yeah, I think it's acknowledging what you have, and let me just speak this about myself, like acknowledging what I have and acknowledging what I don't have. Right. First thing is that just I acknowledge that I have an immense amount of gratitude because I wake up every day with a chemical balance in my brain that lets me see life the way that I do, which is more often than not in a very, very content led manner, right? Not too ecstatic or happy, but also just not sad or upset in most cases. That's not to say I don't get sad or I don't get happy. It's just more often than not, it's my brain just reverts to a state of elevated contentment, which is something that I didn't, this is just me. Like
Yeah,
it's how I was
gratitude.
born. And I
Gratitude for your point of view is a great thing. Yes.
exactly. Exactly. And that's something that I acknowledge that there's clinical reasons for why some people don't feel that way, and that we should 100% enable people to do what they need to do to take care of themselves and to get themselves to that point. But then it's also like acknowledging like what I don't have, which is I think like I don't have um a ton of I don't have it I know I don't have a ton of control over everything else in my life that's not me. And as a control freak, that's like a very
It's hard.
difficult thing to come to terms with.
It's hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that's created like a very powerful like opposite forces basically creating like a sense of what's the word oh man, what's
Tension. A
tension, yeah,
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 sure, sure.
equilibrium,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that lets me kind of like live a very kind of streamlined life. And then I think there's also like a fundamental aspect to this, Steve. Like I think like the two biggest things I like to live a healthy life, but I also like to live a fun life. And when I was a kid, like I saw my mom overcome like a major body transformation to where she, like before taking metformin, before taking any diabetic medication, was able to reduce her blood sugar down to a level where she basically was no longer diabetic, right? Just from diet and exercise. And eventually, decided once it became an appropriate time and age, she took medicine and is in a much healthier place. That had a very profound effect on me, because I saw the importance of physical well-being and physical health at a very young age, and that shaped me right into prioritizing good sleep, good exercise, and more often than not, good diet. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think those three fundamental things can have, it's the fundamentals, right? It's like those three things have made such an incredible impact on my life that I really think it's like without those three as like a bedrock of my life, I don't think I'd wake up every morning feeling the way that I do, right? It sounds
100%.
as cliched as it does. But then, I also balance it with the fact that like I love to have fun. Like, I love to go travel to new places. I love to go eat at new restaurants. I love to go out and have drinks with my friends. Like sometimes do I have one too many? Yes, of course. But I'm at that age where I
Come on,
realize like
Vinayak. One
one too
too
yeah,
many.
exactly.
Come on. Yeah,
Exactly.
sure. It's
Maybe
one.
maybe not just one.
It's one too many. I've had one too many once.
but
Yeah.
but I think within reason it's like finding those hobbies and that balance that I think, and then it comes back to this word balance, but it's finding what that equilibrium is, right? Because me going out eating fried chicken at my favorite restaurant is in direct contrast with the forces that tell me to go sleep, exercise, eat quinoa, kale, and tofu every day, right? It's a direct contrast, but it kind of keeps me centered, right? Which is I've never thought I'd compare my desire to eat fried chicken and my desire to eat
I think it's
quinoa and kale.
balance. I think
But
that you're getting at the sorts of things that, again, it's not rocket science for the things
yeah,
that we know are better for us. Do those more and do the
do this.
bad
Yeah.
stuff less. And
Mm-hmm.
don't beat yourself up if you do the bad stuff sometimes because you like to do it. And
Because you like to
that's
do it exactly within
pretty,
reason.
we've summed it up. We're done. That's great. Awesome.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah.
I'm
No.
gonna add one other thing though that I've noticed, and that is where we oftentimes, and I am so guilty of this as someone who has workaholic tendencies for sure. You give yourself and work into your schedule and your life time off.
Yes.
It's the acronym PTO. The P being planned time off is something that when we were doing things together when you were at Facebook and you had planned time off, I thought, man, that's just great because in the culture that you live in your body, you are comfortable being able to say, hey, look, I'm taking some time off because that's part of life. And that really wasn't baked in to me in my work
Yeah.
experience. It's one of the things I think I was asking that for because I think I'd like you to own it and sort of say it's an important thing to do.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. And again, different roles, right? I mean, you were running an organization and a company that
Yeah.
that was growing, and but yeah, I think taking time off and recharging is really really important. Um, I think it goes back to this fundamentals, right? Just to kind of tie it up with a basketball analogy, because we both love basketball. Like I was thinking back to this the other day, where people like I saw an interview about a bunch of Michael Jordan's college teammates about like what made Michael so great. And for those of you who aren't NBA fans, Michael Jordan's one of the greatest basketball players of all time. There's a reason why people say you are the Michael Jordan of something when you are the best at something, right? Um, and the constant theme around it was just like, yes, Mike had incredible athleticism, right? That he was born with, and just amazing athlete and good basketball player, right? That's a baseline. But what made Michael so remarkable was like his dedication to the fundamentals of the things that you and I may not have seen in the basketball court, but basketball players saw on and off the court, right? Like basic things like footwork, fundamentals with mechanics, like how you posture your arm when you shoot and making that ingrained into your muscle memory, and how you practice off the court. And I think that really stuck with me when I saw it, because again, it's what are the fundamental things that you can do to live the life that you want to live and to have the results that you want to have.
I
That was
think
really
that's
powerful.
absolutely true. And Michael Jordan is such a fascinating example
Yeah.
because it is often true that you make decisions, we all make decisions in our lives that will affect what our outcome is going to be. And you may not be Michael Jordan, but
No.
because you aren't willing to get there and always be there and work as hard as that guy did. But we've witnessed publicly some of the real pain that went along with that for him and people around him. And
Yeah,
that's a
that's a
these are
trade-off.
real choices. In other words,
Yeah.
what is success is the ultimate sort of question when we all seem to be craving to have that thing called success.
Hmm.
And I think it's in lots of different ways. Live, if you live a good life and you are kind to people and you find happiness in your life, I feel like you're a wild success. I would like to put
Hmm.
you on a poster, you know,
Yeah.
but those people don't always wind up on posters.
No,
It's
no.
oftentimes, just the incredible drive and those sorts of things
Yes,
that get someone in another space. But those, are choices that change how your life is, I think, right?
exactly. Exactly. I think, yeah, spot on. The part about success that, at least in the success that our society puts on posters and makes movies out of, and gives shoe deals to, the part about that they don't really talk about is how obsessed are you with success? Um, that is the part that I think often gets left out, is the obsession that each of these people have with becoming successful. It's what, entrepreneurs have. It's what it's that sole belief that their vision needs to come to reality, because to bring their vision into a successful reality, they have an obsession to make it a reality, right?
And
And
that can be, like I said, it can work, it can be disastrous. It's the stories we don't hear because it's a very selective sample that we
yep.
get in the entrepreneurial space and in the business space, because it's just the people who it worked out. And a lot of those stories are wildly lucky that the market
Hmm.
just hit in the right way. They decided that your stock was going to be a meme stock, and all of a sudden, GameStop is
Yeah.
a gigantic company. Well, okay, yeah, you are awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're
Yep.
great. I'm sure you're
Yep.
great. But the we always look at those examples, and I hope we can find the happiness that comes in life generally. All right, we've talked to
Exactly.
forever. I am so glad you came to be with us today. Let's get to something that you would help me get and curate my information life better.
Yeah. The public library, honestly. I am a proud member of both San Francisco's city public library system and Palo Alto's public library system. I think reading physical books is something that has dramatically affected my both attention span and my ability to learn and access information in a different way that I am eternally grateful for. So the public library.
And they're great now. I was just up in
Yeah,
they're
they are.
just I mean, I'm telling you, don't
Yeah.
it is not your grandma's library. It's
No, not at
just
all.
not. So there's nothing that you can imagine in terms of information that is not there, and it fits
Yep.
into the events that they have. You should be paying total attention to, because there's
Yep.
just stuff you couldn't imagine that they're programming all the time, not just for kids. It's great for families and kids because they have that stuff, but for adults as well. I mean, when's the
Yep.
last time you did something in your public library? That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think just two fun stories to that. Like, I think if we always talk about the Library of Alexandria, and how it was like an architectural wonder. If those engineers that built the Library of Alexandria, the patrons of the Library of Alexandria thousands of years ago, got to see the average town in America's public library system, they what you have in an average town outweighs whatever the Library of Alexandria could have
Sure.
had.
Oh, of
And
course.
sometimes some of these libraries are absolute works of art. I mean, like Palo Alto is a very big anomaly, but that library is funded by by the founders of Google and Intel. I mean, Gordon Moore's or sorry, Lucille Packard's foundation is literally one of the primary donors to the Palo Alto library system. I think you just see so much, and you don't have to go to a Silicon Valley library to have this experience. It's wherever your libraries are. I think you can just learn so much and get so much out of it.
Yeah. As you know, I just went to Nova Scotia. It was in Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we did, we went to the public library.
Oh,
And it
nice,
was an amazing,
nice.
I mean, it's the perfect example of what you're talking about. It was a
Yeah,
fantastic place to be. Well, thank you so much, Vinayak Rao, for joining us today on Smarter You. Everybody, make sure to stay curious. Make sure to go out and do something. If you heard anything from Vinayak, it was when you do things, you profit in life. Thanks. We'll see
thank
you
you for having
soon.
me. Bye, everyone.